Hello friends, how are you? I'm Futhark and today I'm going to talk about the rune Sowilō. As you know, this rune literally means sun, the great celestial body, which is the center of our solar system. This is a rune regarded as being extremely positive, related to success and a sense of wholeness, quite obviously related to light and the power of revelation in one's spiritual quest. A life-giving force which gives us motivation, strength, the energy to act and go forward. Confidence in ourselves, and energy so bright that permits us to take action and therefore be successful. A rune of guidance, hope, the power of knowing and interiorizing our capacities, and by knowing our own power, might and strength, we are fearless and hopeful, self-reliant, which puts us in a position where we have a life purpose. And this positive flow of energy and emotions gives us faith in ourselves and in the path we have chosen and the choices we have taken. Again, a sense of wholeness and joy. Sowilō is the rune that represents the seat of the soul, and it's this extremely and rare positive power, the warmth of this power in our own conscious, that we need to harness, control it, and transmute it from reflection into understanding, into energy, and finally apply that energy to action. Because enlightenment is nothing if we do not know how to apply it in our daily lives. Apply it in a way that we are able to continue to transmute thought into energy and use that energy to take action and continue to apply this energy in our lives. Always aiming to have a sense of purpose, setting a goal and channel all our thoughts towards that goal. When we know how to harness the energy of our own thoughts and direct it towards the objectives we have set for ourselves, we strengthen our psyche, our subconscious, and our spirit itself. And there is a great development of our spiritual will and power, which will ultimately lead us to enlightenment. And victory and success can be assured. Our ancestors saw the sun as the embodiment of this energy that gives this power which brings hope and joy and, subsequently, motivation to continue on with our lives. Sowilō is the stylized representation of the light emanating from the sun, the energy itself our bodies absorb when in contact with the light of this celestial body. The sun has been worshipped across many cultures as the embodiment of divine cosmic energy, the metaphorical spark of divine consciousness which radiates light. And the very symbol of Sowilō is a radial symbol, the representation of divine energy radiating from the skies. And it's small wonder that the previous rune, just before Sowilō, is Algis. As I've said on the previous video, the rune Algis resembles the stylized representation of a human being with its arms stretched out upwards, with the legs close together and feet firmly planted on the ground. And in many ancient cultures, and we have this perception in archaeological terms, at least since the early Neolithic, but also very prominent during the early Bronze Age, that there was this belief that the reception of the divine power is through the hands. One of the most ancient performances in various religious ceremonies is precisely extending the arms upward with open hands and palms outward to receive the divine power and to give our own power to the divine, which the pre-Christian Germanic peoples called Begin, one's power, essence, energy, might and strength that we share with the divine powers in exchange for their Begin, for their strength and power. So, the previous rune, Auris, speaks about the divine power, and the next rune, Sowilō, elaborates on that divine power and its attributes and blessings. Auris is the reception of divine power, and Sowilō is that divine power itself, spiritual power residing in celestial bodies that have a direct influence upon our lives. One rune complements the other. Sowilō is the eminent spiritual forces that guide us through life. Think of life as a great tree, just like Yggdrasil. We often go up and down the tree. But Sowilō is the spiritual forces that helps us to reach the top of the tree. It is the force that gives us a sense of purpose, an objective, and the energy to achieve our goals. For what purpose is life if not to acquire knowledge? Aren't we here to learn what it's like to be a human, what it's like to be alive and experience life itself? And all this knowledge, what is it for if not to reach enlightenment? The top of the tree. Sowilō is that very spiritual force that gives us the power and will to reach the top. When we reach the top, we know the path, and we will be able to descend once again, to go into the roots of the great tree of life, and up again, because we have reached enlightenment. And with such spiritual power, we flow through the roots and branches of life itself. Sowilō is the connection between the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Sowilō is the flow of divine spark that gives us the capacity to reach far into the cosmos, through time and space. But in a simpler perspective, the sun, or in this case the sunlight, is an essential natural force that causes everything to grow on Earth. It gives this idea of fertility and prosperity. The sun was obviously highly worshipped since the Neolithic for obvious reasons, praising the sun for its power and light and energy for the growing of all things that sustain us. Before the Neolithic, you don't see a lot of evidences of the importance of the sun in human lives. In fact, until the late Mesolithic, it's the moon that plays an important role in the human lives. We know that before the Neolithic, the moon had more importance than the sun, and the older calendar is a Mesolithic moon or lunar calendar, and people guided their lives before the Neolithic by the phases of the moon. But that doesn't mean the sun did not have importance as well. I'm quite sure it did. Even though people guided their lives by the phases of the moon, the sun must have been highly important all across the Paleolithic and in the colder and dark atmospheres felt all across the northern hemisphere. The sun was surely a sign of hope, light into the world, protection from darkness, a breaker of ice. If we take a look at the Elder Futhark, it's divided by 3 heaths, 3 rows of runes, and each with 8 runes forming 24 runes of the Elder Futhark. Sowilō is the last rune of the second row, and this row starts with Hogalas, Nauthis, and Isa. It starts with a wintry cycle to end in warmth, hope and joy. Like I said, Sowilō is the breaker of ice. In the second row stands at the opposite extreme of this cycle. All rows tell a story, a continuous story of birth, life, death, and rebirth. So Sowilō is regarded as the most beneficial rune in the Elder Futhark. Sowilō is the counter force to the cosmic ice represented in the rune Isa. It is the force that smashes harsh, rigid, and immovable forces of winter, of ice itself. And if we take the actual natural effects of the sun upon light, or the warmth upon cold, into a more poetic view of the self, the warmth of the season of the sun breaks the wintry atmosphere just as Sowilō breaks the winters of the soul. Sowilō is the representation of the force of fire, both in physical and mental realities. Now let's take a quick look at the Norse myths to understand part of the essence of this rune, or myth in general. Sowilō is regarded as a symbol of enlightenment, which represents the power, the strength to banish evil, to ward off malevolent forces. In Norse mythology, the power of the sun, and all religious symbols attributed to it, had the same basic function, to protect against chaotic forces that might disturb the balance or the order of things. In the Norse myths, the beings representative of chaotic powers are said to turn into stone when they come in contact with the rays of the sun. Throughout the history of mankind, at least around Europe, sun worship is clearly noticeable in rock art, and it's not different in Scandinavia. There is a clear, continuous evolution of the solar religious symbols. I've made a video about it, which you might want to check on this upper corner by clicking the information icon. Solar deities are quite common throughout Europe, which is why, with the coming of Christianity, the solar motifs and solar deities were one of the very first points Christianity had to work against due to the importance of such religious ideas and motifs in the lives of the pagans they wanted to convert. Christianity highly stigmatized sun worship because they thought the pagans worshipped the sun as an actual god. Certainly, pagans had solar deities, but solar deities had a variety of attributes people praised, and such deities are just embodiments of certain aspects of the beneficial forces the sun provides. To the pagans, the actual sun worship was not about worshipping it as a deity, as a god or goddess, the way Christians worship their God, an actual figure. To the pagans, the worshipping of the sun was more animistic. Pagans venerated the sun as a physical embodiment of the spiritual principles of light and energy. And in the northern regions of Europe, such as Scandinavia, there were plenty of reasons to venerate those powers. Living in landscapes devastated by the unforgiving powers of winter for almost the entire year, and long dark winters, frigid atmosphere, and extreme cold, the Norse had plenty of reasons to worship the powers of the sun. And it's curious to see in the Norse myths that the sun is regarded as being female all the time, which isn't that surprising given the fact that almost every ancient civilization that worshipped the sun, this celestial body was regarded as being female, or female deities were connected to the sun. Athena, Aurora, Eos, the dawn, Bastet from Egypt was originally a sun goddess. In Basque mythology, Eki is the sun goddess, daughter of Earth Mother. And take special notice at that. The great solar goddess of the Iberians during the Chalcolithic, Macha, a goddess of Ireland connected to the sun in the province of Ulster. Paivathar, Lady Sun, the goddess of the sun in Finnish mythology. And of course, in Norse mythology, Suna or Sol. And the list could go on, obviously. Mostly, in prehistoric Europe, the sun was regarded as female, especially by tribal communities whose animistic concepts of the spiritual were very firm and well preserved. We can clearly see that the sun worship of the ancient world of prehistoric times, the sun's feminine gender is entwined with the veneration of the earth goddess as a symbol of divine source. And with the rise of the Indo-European sky gods, the male gender enters in the sun worship alongside with the female sun. And it's curious because we have indications in many myths that when Indo-European religious beliefs in sky deities come in contact with various indigenous solar goddesses, there is a marriage between sky gods and sky goddesses. This sounds quite romantic, but it was extremely practical. The fusion of religious ideas, a marriage between deities to help in creating harmony and concordance among the people. And after Indo-European religious beliefs settled all over prehistoric Europe, you start to see all sorts of divine couples. Again, the marriage between the sky gods with the various prehistoric indigenous solar goddesses. Later on, obviously, the Christian Church, which is also based on the sky god cult, was very hostile to the worship of a natural phenomenon and celestial bodies as embodiments of divine feminine powers, because Christianity was all for the male figure as the divine power and would refuse to acknowledge the female aspects in nature and in the divine, because by acknowledging that, it would inevitably lead to accepting the existence of the worship of goddesses, which just wouldn't work with the Christian soul belief on a male sky god. But well, pre-Christian cultures worship the sun as also being feminine entity, because its attributes are in direct unity or concordance with the fertility attributes of the earth goddess. Always this idea of nourishment, protection, growth, fertility, and so on, which Indo-Europeans took a brilliant advantage of that and incorporated into their own myths of sky gods, thus making a fusion with both polarities, male and female, which created an outstanding and very well-structured belief system in almost perfect concordance with the realities of the natural world. And speaking of Northern Europe, there is another interesting aspect not often talked about. The fact that the sun will eventually succumb to the destruction of Ragnarok. But as you know, Ragnarok doesn't mark the end of life, or it isn't the same as the biblical apocalypse notion. Ragnarok marks the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new one. In pagan societies, this cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth is always very present. And when the sun is devoured by the great wolf, there will be a new sun in the new age, in the beginning of the new cycle of life. That new sun is female. She is the daughter of the sun goddess. You can confirm this in the Voluspa and Vafthrudnismal, and even Snorre Sturluson confirms this in the Prose Edda, in Gylfaginning. After the greatest of catastrophes, there will be a regeneration, a rebirth, the beginning of a new cycle. And after the darkness, there comes a new light, a new sun, the first thing to come forth after the darkness and destruction, a symbol of hope. Now let's talk about this rune when it appears in a rune reading. Sowilō is a token of guidance, of walking straight into the light. So when it appears in a rune reading, it is a favorable omen. It signals a sense of wholeness in the darker moments of life, or a particular quest you have set yourself into. Sowilō will ward against the harmful opinions of others to keep your heart, mind, and spirit focused on your purpose. There will certainly be times in your life that your work, your objective, quest, goal will be highly judged by many people, highly misinterpreted and misunderstood. So there will be a lot of hate and ignorance and negativity towards you and the objective or the choices you have taken for yourself. If you keep true to yourself and your beliefs, if you keep true to the objective you have set for yourself, the power of Sowilō will eventually come. Your perseverance will pay off, and your mind will be focused on your purpose, and every negativity coming from the outside won't get in, because Sowilō is the protective shield you have constructed with your strength of mind. Since in the harsh northern world the sun was beloved by all, for obvious reasons pointed out previously, Sowilō is primarily a rune of love. Not love in the sense of affection between human beings. The appearance of Sowilō in a rune reading signals a warm glow over all the other runes present in that rune reading. And so Sowilō will undo much of the harm that those runes may foretell. It is a rune of hope, after all, and the idea that no matter what, the sun will rise once again tomorrow, even though today the night seems quite dark and scary, it's always present in Sowilō. It is a particularly good rune to draw when one is in trouble, because it will ensure a happy outcome. One might also say that Sowilō expresses the idea of poetic justice, because it indicates that those who did you wrong will gain nothing but an appropriate punishment for their offenses. The pursuit of integrity is the pursuit of the spiritual warrior in you. However, what you are trying to become is actually what you are by nature. Sowilō in a rune reading indicates the awareness of your essence, acknowledging it and express yourself in a creative manner. If you have a major decision to make, then the appearance of Sowilō will reveal the truth of the situation, making your choice easier. There is a spiritual dimension to this rune as well, and when it is drawn, you should maintain contact with your inner self to seek guidance. And even though this rune has no inverted position, there is reason for caution, always. Peace and happiness is never a permanent state of affairs. You may have to withdraw when face to face with situations that cause an overwhelming pressure on you, especially if events or people are asking you to spend your entire energy in those situations. Be aware that a retreat is sometimes an act of strength and integrity to seek balance again, to seek harmony in your mind. Temporary withdrawals are among the attributes of the spiritual warrior. Sowilō advises you to open yourself, letting the light illuminate parts of your life that were forcibly hidden. But to do this, to open yourself to the warming light, may require a deep recognition of certain aspects within yourself and to admit something within you that has long been ignored. You shall need courage, and that courage lies in the motivation and hope implied in Sowilō itself. Do not lose yourself in your own ego. Even in blessed times, you will be asked to face and overcome the refusal of your own nature, to let the right actions flow through you. But all in all, Sowilō signals a time when happiness and harmony will reign and justice will prevail. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed yet another video on the runes. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, talk pretty long.